Thank you for coming and watching this update on Shadowservers capabilities and capacity and how Shadowserver services can help you secure, lock down, and have risk reduction on your network. This is one of the monthly updates that we're doing. This is a re-recording from a webinar that was done in April of 2024. And we're putting it online so people can go back and review at their leisure. My name's Barry Green. I'm one of the volunteers and one of the people who work with Shadowserver over the years. I've been a longtime user of Shadowserver, so I'm somebody on the team who is used it in many different of the networks that I've operated and many different networks that I've helped build out, and I help colleagues around the world to get and use Shadowserver to help protect their network in a very cost-effective way. This information is all TLP clear. For those of you who don't know what the traffic light protocol is, TLP, it is something that we use within the security community to put the confidentiality. In other words, is this something you can share with others? TLP clear means you can share with anybody. So you can share the link to this presentation and the PDFs with this presentation to any of your colleagues and any of your friends. There are other things in the security world that is you don't want to share. You know, for instance, those would be TLP red. Those are like investigations and takedown exercises and things we do. And there's TLP amber types of modes where you keep it confidential within a community who is working together collaboratively. And then TLP green. And all this is, if you go to www.first.org/TLP, you can find out all the different details around this particular specification that we use to keep confidentiality across the world in the cybersecurity community. Now, who is Shadowserver? Sounds, why does Shadowserver name? The Shadowserver Foundation is an internet critical, not-for-profit organization. It's a not-for-profit organization. So in other words, it's in a unique position where it doesn't have to depend on cyber criminal activities to survive. As a matter of fact, the mission of Shadowserver is to go out there and reduce the risk of cyber criminal activities and other sorts of things that harm the whole online internet defense, right? Shadowserver has a infrastructure you're going to find out more about, and it shares information with the internet defenders. That means you who are listening to this, who have to defend your network, have to defend your customers. It shares details to help you at no cost to you to mitigate the vulnerabilities, detect malicious activity on your network, and counter the different emergent threats. It's highly supported by all the national CSIRTs around the world, by law enforcement, by governments, by internet researchers, and people who have been doing this for quite a long time. So this is kind of like the Shadowserver Foundation, a lot of trust. Why are we here? Back in the early days of Cisco systems, people used to have this thing that you'll hear John Chambers talk about, that there are two types of companies, those who know they have been hacked and those who have been hacked and just don't know it. And this has been true, but now there's a third type. There's organizations who are aware of the security risk and they know they're going to get hacked and they're paralyzed. Shadowserver is here to help all three of those. Organizations who know they have been hacked, this is a tool to help them. The organizations who have not, who have been hacked and don't know about it, Shadowserver, I know in my particular case, there's been a couple of times where I got notified that I had been hacked through Shadowserver. I did not know it. None of my security tools showed it, but Shadowserver gave a report that actually clued me in that something was going on, and I was able to fix it before it got even worse, right? And Shadowserver, what you'll hear in here also is its reporting system allows you to actually get out of the paralysis and take action. So this is kind of like, three different things you can get out of listening through this presentation, because times are bad. When you look at it, if you're a cybersecurity company, it's going to be good times, right? There's the more and more need for cybersecurity companies and services and capability out there, so the market looks good. But as you're paying more and more money, as we are paying more and more money, we should see something happen. We should see the risk go down. But when you take from this organization, Statistica, they put together statistics, and you take this particular data set that shows the cybersecurity market growth, and you add it to the cyber crime growth. See the blue area down there, that's the cyber security, market growth. And you look at it and you look at the cost of cybercrime. Cybercrime is now $1 billion industry. $1 billion industry. It's a criminal enterprise. It's $1 billion industry and keeps on going up every year. Something is not working. It's not, and this is one of the things where tools and the nonprofit organizations like Shadowserver, can come in and help out where maybe we can put a dent. Maybe we need to rethink what's going on. Now, in rethinking what's going on, one of the things we got to remember is the world doesn't have geographic boundaries when it comes to the internet. You can be down in New Zealand and try to say, okay, I'm going to try to put a wall around myself to protect myself. But that's not how the internet works. It's all like shoved together. All the countries are shoved right over. So even though you may be, way down under in New Zealand, you're still interconnected with the entire planet. So your threat vector is from the entire planet, right? As we've seen, like, for instance, when the tanks rolled across the border and you had the Russians go after Viasat, it impacted all over Europe. It wasn't just something that, impacted one country trying to go after Ukraine. It impacted all over. No Patriots, did the same thing. So cyber walls around a country, cyber walls around a company, just, they're useful. They're a tool, layer of defense or a tool, but sometimes what you need to do is you need to actually join a collaborative group that goes out there and helps everyone get fixed up. So one of the things that Shadowserver does is, there's a term we use in the cybersecurity community called smoke jumping, where we see a hotspot, where we can say, hey, we're seeing a lot of infected devices in Brazil, or a lot of CPEs in Vietnam, or a lot of new vulnerable Microsoft Exchange servers in the United States. We're able to do hotspots and say, let's go clean those up. Let's go mitigate the risk. Let's help those organizations get them cleaned up before some bad guy connects into them and reuses them for their bad activities on the internet. And that's what you do with smoke jumping. And this goes around to Shadowserver's mission. When you look up what Shadowserver is all about, two core theories of change. The mission is to make the internet more secure by bringing light to the vulnerabilities and malicious activities and emergent threats. It's promoting a culture of sharing, of equipping organizations to improve the security, of supporting the criminal investigations. In other words, how can you go after the cyber criminals, protect the victims, which is this presentation is all about, and offer free remediation reports. In other words, the reporting that you can get from here to help out. Shadowserver is driven by the vision of a secure, threat-free internet. This is where the cyber civil defense term comes about with this. And you get this from a term, one of the supporters of Shadowserver, Craig Newmark from Craigslist, he goes around and he supports organizations to cyber civil defense. In other words, think groups like Shadowserver who go and put the mission is to actually protect and increase the skills and capability, capacity through, knowledge and training and reporting and a suite of different activities we're talking about here in this update. So let's talk about rethinking cybersecurity. Using Shadowserver as one of the tools to rethink it. All right, so simple things. I've been doing this for 40 years, doing cybersecurity activities. That means got a lot of experience, a lot of hard knocks. And one of the things I've learned is best common practices. Security best common practices, habits that we do day in, day out, are the most effective tool that I personally have found to reduce risk to my organization from all sorts of cybersecurity attacks. They take time, they take persistence, they take consistency, and they're cheap because you don't need to pay to subscribe to get any of these security services. You don't need to buy expensive scanning services to do this, right? You can have access to the most advanced surface area security scanning service to let you know what the bad guy threat actors can see on your network, right? And all this is free as a Shadowserver public service, providing the daily reports via email and via APIs. All you need to do is act, subscribe, and start looking at the reports and acting on it. And let me give you an example of this. Years ago, I was taken over being one of the key tech people over at one of the large cell phone companies in Indonesia. We didn't have a security team, a cybersecurity team. We had an IT person, but we didn't have a cybersecurity team. Now, I personally know, because of looking around the network, that I had miscreants all over the network. I had state actors on my network from all different types of countries. So I go to my boss and say, we need to get this much budget. He says, well, we don't have this budget. So what do? I take the Shadowserver report, take 2 college graduates right out of school, right? Because I can get the college graduates, and a lot of departments didn't know what to do with these new kids, bright, brilliant kids right out of college in Indonesia, didn't know what to, how do I use them in my department? Well, I took them in, said, I'm going to take 2 of you and you're going to become security gurus. Here's what you're going to do. We're going to pull up the Shadowserver report, and we're going to take one issue at a time. I'm going to teach you how to take and clean it up, fix it, set up the processes and procedures, and hunt, do some hunting based off of it. All right. Now the Shadowserver reports, you get these reports like this. Everything is detailed. So you get, depending on how much stuff is on your network, you get a whole bunch of materials on the network. Everything is all API based, so you get all the details, the fields, so you get a lot of good stuff in the reporting on there. So with all these different reports, what I would do is you say I got all these reports with lots of issues. Where do we start? We pick one of the reports. We review the risk. So I teach D2's college kids, here's a risk we need to do. We need to go figure out what to do with this risk. Then we're going to teach you how to mitigate the risk. Now, in our position in a cell phone company, you just can't go fix it. You got to set up a process. You got to set up a change order. So I taught them how to do that. So we got to change a configuration on a piece of equipment because it's vulnerable. We got to fix that. We got to set up the policy. So we document the policy so it doesn't happen again. All right. And then we go out there and say, okay, let's think. Could somebody have exploited this? This has been open for a while. Can we exploit it? And if we think somebody could exploit it, then we start a deeper investigation. If not, then we go back next day, pick another report, start the whole thing over again. What happens is that you get this rhythm. Every single day you go through this rhythm of back and forth. So you take one example. This is like a sanitized example of one of the live networks out there. Simple Network Management Protocol. You should never see Simple Network Management Protocol exposed on the internet. That's a best common practice. So many networks have SNMP exposed. It's wide open. You could see it wide open on later on when we'll talk about the Shadowserver dashboard, where you can see exposed Simple Network Management Protocol. There's a lot out there. And it's public. You can see the information on here that's exposed. You got the actual, here's the device. Here's the IP address. Here's the host name. I blocked those out to keep them confidential. Here's the actual software version. Oh, let's go to Cisco. Oh, check out. Here's a vulnerability. It hasn't been patched. Hey, I know how I can break in. This is what Shadowserver provides you. So this is not like a new thing. Back to basics, doing these basic, what we call preventive maintenance inspections, PMIs, every single day, preventive maintenance inspections. So it's not the big, complicated sort of tools that are the impact. It's that habit of doing the basics every day. And then when you do the basics every day and you take the Shadowserver reports and you get everything off the Shadowserver reports resolved, then you go spend money and get the next thing you want to get. And you're going to be able to use whatever commercial tool you add into your network. And you use it to the max because you use the same habit every single day, over and over again, right? A lot of times people buy the expensive tools, and the expensive tools sit there and nobody uses them. Again, they buy the expensive tools, all the security telemetry, and nobody uses them because they've not started a habit. So when I go into an organization, I consult with executives and say, here's what we need to do. What we need to do is we go through and we start with the basics. We get these basics done. Let's start with the Shadowserver reports. Let's get them done. Once you get them all cleaned out, the Shadowserver reports then become an alert. So if all of a sudden you get a report and says, oh, simple network management protocol is exposed. There's 2 devices online. You see, something didn't work right. Somebody added some network switches, didn't configure them properly. Let's go open up a ticket. Let's go clean them up. Then they become an alerting tool. And a lot of organizations, that's what it's providing with you. Now, where's all this data coming from? So Shadowserver has a bunch of data sets, everything from a whole bunch of malware binary analysis that's like all the malware. There's a lot of different antivirus endpoint protection companies who actually exchange binaries with Shadowserver. So if you are one of those endpoint protection companies and you are not actually exchanging with Shadowserver, you're missing out, because it's a peering relationship. So if you got 1,000 samples a day, you send 1,000 samples to Shadowserver. Shadowserver then sends you 1,000 samples you don't have. You just doubled your analysis capability. Shadowserver has its own analysis capability. They have sinkholes that kick in. In other words, they participate with where you got joint action in the community to take down particular malware, and they put in the sinkholes. They got vulnerability notifications. You sign up to the public services. All the times you get heads up. Hey, this vulnerability is out. Here's how you can find it in the reports to find out if you have any devices that are on the list. You have botnet infiltration. In other words, you have botnets that get the command and control gets taken over because they decide we're going to do a takedown operation, and so the botnet command and control gets sinkholed. There's a massive honeypot system. So a lot of times what Shadowserver does is when a new vulnerability comes out, it sets up a report. So you get a report from a scan, and then you got a report in the honeynet to let you know when somebody's actually looking to break into it. You got feeds from service providers, massive scanning, V4, V6. V6 is unique in the industry. Not many organizations do V6. Shadowserver has a algorithm to go out there and scan for what I personally call the lit up V6 space. Lit up means there's an IP address and there's a device on it. You have dark, which is there's an IP address and there's nothing behind it, right? So it's lit up V6 space. And so we're asking our constituents to register the V6 space to help out with that. Different takedown operations, malware analysis, all this is part of reporting. All this is like, a public service, cyber civil defense. People can sign up to this and they don't have to pay anything. The cost to you is signing things up and doing the work to clean up your network with all this sort of stuff. This is what Shadowserver is providing. So every day you'll have some sort of like somebody in the security community find a major vulnerability. They notify the vendor and they notify, hey, Shadowserver, can you do some scanning? Can you look for it, right? And then you'll get the announcement in the press, right? Where, hey, here's a new hijack or something. And then it pops up and sends out to now it's over 8,000, approaching the 9,000 organizations who have signed up to Shadowserver reporting, right? So this is kind of like the approach. And the approach also is set up where you don't try to do like everything that you see in your reports right away. You pick one and you work on it. You pick the next one and you work on it, because you're in a whirlwind of activities. So what you want to do is not try to do too many. That's one of the mistakes people make, right? So what happens is this is like a simple a thing to be mindful of. You can have, here's the number of security things I want to take care of, right? And a lot of times this is one of the problems with CSOs. CISOs will say, oh, I got to solve all these problems. And they'll say, okay, let's go out there and, good ones will say, here's 2 or 3. And what did they achieve? They get 2 or 3 done, right? Then others will say, no, I can do more. I'll do 10. If you try to do 10, what happens? You get like maybe 1 done. Oh, I got like this big long list I got to get done. I'll get 20 done. What happens? Nothing really gets done because you do too much. So the trick to this approach of bringing security and resiliency to network using a tool like Shadowserver is not to try to do too much. Just do 1 a day, 1 report a day, clean it up, go to the next one, do the next one. every day. Right? It's the habit with it. And all of a sudden you'll 2 months down the road, you'll look behind you and go like, wow, look at all the stuff we cleaned up. I'm much more confident in what's happened on the network. And how much did it cost me? You signed up for the reports and you took action. So you spent your money on the action versus spending money on a bunch of commercial tools, right? So, poor execution is one of the key things with it. So this is kind of like, part of the community work. Now, what's happened over the years, Shadowserver has been around for 20 years now. And all these different, let's work together in the community. Let's work together with service spotters. Let's work on big takedown exercises like the Conflict Working Group or the DCWG Working Group or things like that. Let's work with law enforcement. The law enforcement, say, hey, let's take down this DDoS crew or something like that. Law enforcement needs help, right? That's built up a lot of trust in the community. So even though people go like, Shadowserver, who are them? There's a lot of people who's been doing this for a long time and they really trust what Shadowserver can do with it, right? The numbers of what they do, right? It's phenomenal. When you take all the data sets in there, you take all the different scanning and capabilities that happens every day with the, petabytes and billions of SSL certificates and all this other stuff I monitor. It's just one of the big treasures of cybersecurity out there that is available everybody here, and here's what you can actually leverage and do with it. So it's got coverage, the constituents all over the world and working to get more and more people connected up to it, right? Connected up to the organization. One of the things to remember is this, though. If Shadowserver sees it, the bad guys can actually see it. And that's one of the key things, especially with the scanning. If there's a scan and Shadowserver sees it, the bad guys see it. That's reality check. So that's when you got a whole bunch of different security tools. If you got here's a report from Shadowserver, here's a report from some other tool. One of the things the triage says, if it's on a Shadowserver report, some bad guy sees that, that's a entry point that I need to plug up really quick. So let's go plug it up. Shadowserver also, you can have multiple teams inside your organization get the data, right? Again, we'll teach you here in a minute of how to set the reports. Your network team can get the data set, the security team, the product team, the InfoSec team, the compliance team, right? You can set all this up and it's all API. Yes, we've been using email as a reporting system for a long time. For the last 4 to 5 years, the API engine has been the preferred method that we're helping organizations integrate into the system, right, with the API system. Now, what's interesting about this is all this work for the past 20 years, in March 2024, Vulncheck is launching their service, so they're launching their service. And one of the things they launched their service with is they kind of did a survey of the different organizations that have been reporting critical, of exposures, critical vulnerabilities, and which ones have been doing the most effective work. And it's kind of surprised people in the Shadowserver community are right there. Larger than the CISA, United States, larger than Microsoft, larger than Google, larger than Palo Alto, larger than number one, Shadowserver. People are going like, who's Shadowserver? What? Why are they more effective? Because the 8,000 plus constituents out there have been using Shadowserver for over 2 decades now and leveraging it. So one of the things you ask your team, how are we leveraging Shadowserver? Can we do more with the leverage work, right? Keep on asking questions, send questions into Shadowserver. Then you ask your vendors, are you part of the Shadowserver Alliance? Because we do certain things with partners out there. People can join the alliance. People can partner with us. Shadowserver doesn't sell any data, so you don't have to worry about that. It's not into the nonprofit model is not about selling data. We'll talk about that in a little bit, about being very, very particular about protecting your data set on your network, right? So that's very particular on that. But there are other things you can do. We got a lot of corporate partners working with Shadowserver. And then ask your telcos, hey, I can connect to you. I'm buying internet service from you. What are you doing with Shadowserver? Are you looking at the Shadowserver reports on problems on your network? Are you taking care of things like the simple network management protocol? Are you taking care of that on your network? You'll be surprised how many ISPs and telcos don't do that, right? But if you ask, they will go out there and it doesn't cost them anything for the reporting. See, that's the beauty of it. So now let's talk about how we connect up, all right? So let's help everybody. The idea here is help everybody improve, right? We're going to be doing briefings like this. This is part of this briefing cycle that we're starting up in 2024. So we get more organizations to get access. We're going to have multiple tools we'll work through. So one of the follow-up presentations you're going to hear about says, oh, how do we integrate Grafana? How do we integrate with Splunk? How do we integrate with this particular tool? So that way you can see how you integrate certain tools out there with a theme towards open source sort of tooling at first, right? So you can manage the overload with it, right? Because, our goal in 2024 is expand the number of constituents, right? So constituents are like you. If you listen to this, you're a potential constituent who can leverage and use Shadowserver to actually reduce the risk within their network, right? And so that's the core thing, is to help the constituents do that. And then work with the Shadowserver Alliance. So all this is funded through organizations who say our job is, our business model depends on a safe internet. And to have a safe internet, we will support the Shadowserver Alliance to go out there and promote a safe internet, right? So, and Shadowserver Alliance is different from other security organizations in that it's very tangible. It's like, here's the reports, here's the constituents fixing problems. As they fix problems, the internet becomes safer. So the Shadowserver Alliance members are able to go like, see, this is going to help safeguard my bank. This is going to help safeguard my country. This is going to help safeguard my manufacturing operation. This is going to help safeguard my backbone because I'm an internet backbone, right? So that's what the Shadowserver Alliance, that's what the funda model is around about. So where do you sign up to get the reports? You go online, go to Shadowserver, it says subscribe to reports. And they're going to be asked who you are, what's your name, organization, because Shadowserver is going to make sure you are somebody who's authorized to the next thing, the autonomous system numbers, the IP address blocks, the domain names. And there may be some correspondence back and forth because you say, hey, I got some permanent IP address space from my hosting provider. And then Shadowserver will email back and forth with you to kind of clarify, to make sure you got authorization for those IPs, right? This sort of dialogue makes sure that this information that it's going to be delivered to you, you're authorized to actually leverage that. So it's this trust in stage, right? That Shadowserver is very particular to make sure that happens. The form looks something like this, where you fill the details in, you put the references in, so you can, any sort of referrals or things like that helps speed things up. Once you get connected up, it's just a healthy dialogue that we go through and we help people out. Now on this information on the data sharing, you get the data on your network. Here's my autonomous system number. Here's my IP address blocks, v4, v6. Here's my domain names, right? That is not sold to anybody. That's not given to anybody. The only one who gets it is you. So if you are organization B, B is the only one who gets the information. If I'm organization A, I don't get anything from about B. If I'm organization C, I don't get anything from C, right? So it's very particular on this. A lot of times people will say, oh, wow, I love what Shadowserver's done. Here, I want to join the foundation and give me all your data. Shadowserver says, no, thank you. We don't do that. It's very particular about protecting the integrity of the data set. It's been like that for 20 years, and Shadowserver survived for 20 years with it. And that's the sort of thing with the only exception to that is if you're a validated national CSIRT. But validated national CSIRT, in other words, you have been vetted, you're part of the first.org or something like that, you're connected to a national government, right? All this is and that information will be protected within, the national CSIRT environment. And Shadowserver has been working with national CSIRTs for 20 years. And there are people in Shadowserver who are used to work at national CSIRT. So we kind of know how to build trust within that community. And that's worked quite well for 30 years. Now, when you send your data in, Shadowserver is going to create these email lists for you and anybody in your organization you sign up. And you can have multiple of them with it. You start it with one, and then we can go, Shadowserver will go back and forth and say, oh, I need one for my network team. I need one for my SOC. I need one for my compliance people, right? So we will work that out with you to figure that out. But we start with one. Start with one, get things started, right? There's 3 basic reports that get started with: autonomous system, IP, V4 and V6. We're looking for the V6 too, all right? And you get the list of domains. Some people can just put the ASN in because we take what's in the ASN, but some, within your backbone environment, but others, all they have is the IP addresses, right? So that's the basics. So other reports besides this. So once you get started, you'll learn about, oh, there's these other reports you have. Oh, let's sign up to those. Oh, there's other different types of aggregate reports, and you can sign up to those, right? So that's the sort of thing with it. And then we'll have a mailing list for it, right? So we'll have here's the organization, who's in the mailing list, and you can have multiple people in the mailing list, all right? And then here's the ASNs that's detailed, right, in the report. And then by default, we sign you up to most of the reports. We got a default set of reports we sign you up to. They're not all the reports, and new reports are added all the time. And some reports are retired. In other words, that particular issue has been replaced by a newer report, or that particular issue is just not showing up anymore. It's so old, it's not showing up anymore. So, the number of reports go up and down, right? And you get this update with it. Every now and then you can ping Shadowserver, says, hey, can you give me some of the charts? I want to show my boss, right? In the future, we're looking for organizations to fund, enhance per autonomous system charting. And, that's how enhancements happen, is organizations, contribute money to a SOW for a grant and say, hey, Shadowserver, you can code this new feature. But right now you can email out there, and you can get API keys in plural, right? Because you set up with one API key to try it out, and then you say, okay, I'm going to have an API key for my Grafana. I have an API key into the script to go into say Splunk. I'm going to have another API to go into my CrowdStrike tool, or another tool to go into my Sophos tool, right? You can set up multiple APIs, and here's my testing environment. I'll write an own script. And that's best practices for APIs. Now what happens is once a quarter, we send you a summary. Here's all the people who sign up to an email list. Here's all the people API keys you got. So that way you can review and you say, oh, wait a minute, this person's left the organization. Can you expire the key, delete the key, and take them off the mailing list, right? So that's quarterly we send these updates out with. Everything, all the APIs are documented. So we got a GitHub wiki app, the Shadowserver Foundation. Everything's out there with the API stuff, so you can find out there. So you can say, here's how I set up my APIs to pull it in. It's all very basic schema systems that we set up with it. So you got all the documentation. You go here on the GitHub and look a keyword search for Shadowserver and look for the Shadowserver Foundation on GitHub. All right. As an example, Akamai kind of shared this kind of slide and say, here's one of the tools they wrote internally for their security team, where they got a nice little tool. They take that tool and they pull in the Shadowserver reports via the API, and anybody in the company can connect up to it and they can access it and they can start looking at different things in there. Big networks like Shadowserver, like Akamai, they would use Shadowserver to do an audit on the thousands of devices out there. So it's they'll look for those things that, hey, here's a box and there's a new port on this box that should not be open. Flag it, remove it from the cluster, go out and get it fixed. So because they're on top of things security wise, so Shadowserver becomes a good check and balance to their operations of their security tool set, right? So you'll find a lot of mature organizations that way. They'll use the tool as a check and balance to all the other commercial tools out there. There are tools, report tools out there like the Report Manager, Intel MQ. Stay tuned for another webinar on the NQ. The authors are going to share how they integrated into Shadowserver for that part. And so there's more to find about this. This is an open source tool. So if you're looking for some tool to play around with that integrates into MISP, Shadowserver, and a whole bunch of other data sets, Intel MQ. Nice little cool tool. Stay tuned for a webinar just on that. We got organizations that pull it into their Elasticsearch data lakes, right? So the tool is out there for that. So you've kind of seen the theme. Yes, you can get the email reports and you start up that way to learn about Shadowserver, but we got organizations who say, well, I got everything into Elasticsearch. I don't need the emails anymore. So all they do is email APIs. So the email, they don't get any emailed reports anymore. Same thing with Splunk. They can pull it into Splunk, and you'll see more out there. All right, you'll see more of these out there because we use this common event format. So there's a common event format script technique here that converts it over so you can actually pull it into any login facility that uses common event format. So if you have a scene tool, from some vendor and they say, well, we only support common event format, there's a script right there on Shadowserver's GitHub, and you can pull it down and use it for that. And we have the links in this. So in this presentation on when it gets posted to YouTube, you'll be able to see the link to the PDF and pull down these links down here. So now we transition over the visibility of it, where you can say, like, we got the all these exploited vulnerabilities, we got things putting up on dashboards. And we'll talk more about the dashboards here in it. This particular view is the exploited vulnerability list, right? We got actually ways, if you're a vendor and we got vendors out there who say, I love this list, and they screen scrape it. If you want this list and you want it plugged into your tool, contact Shadowserver at the contact and let us know, and we will say, here, we'll set you up where you got an API and you can integrate this into your tool. Because remember Shadowserver's mission. Shadowserver's mission is all about helping the constituents get a safer internet. So if this tool, you as a commercial vendor, you find this valuable into your helping your customers, let us know, because you're the one out there helping the customers actually get it fixed. We are the ones helping with the reporting. You are actually in a position to get it fixed. Because this is all about getting through the sandstorm. I use this analogy that today's security environment, we're in a sandstorm of like all this security information coming at you. And what do you do about it, right? It's horrible with it. So there's certain things that Shadowserver is trying to do with the sandstorm. Sign up to our public mailing list, because we are, once or twice a week, there's something going on and Shadowserver is posting, here's a brand new vulnerability. It's a critical vulnerability. Here's how you can use a Shadowserver report to fix it, or to find it, or to find out if you're vulnerable to it, right? So this is the problems that we're running into. We're running into so many alerts out there that Shadowserver, in our unique position, is able to actually put information out the door quicker, than you get the press, right? That's the key thing. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the people in the press, you'll find Shadowserver dashboards used in the press because the Shadowserver dashboard is already displaying it, right? And if you're part of the alliance, what happens is as these reports are being crafted, it's shared within the alliance. So this is one of the reasons I joined the alliance. It's shared within the alliance as the report's being crafted, and the alliance members kind of like double check it, and then it gets pushed out public. This is all rapid pace of different activities out there. So sign up to the public mailing list, sign up to Twitter, sign up to the LinkedIn, right? This is one of the key things out there. The email list, LinkedIn, X, Twitter, sign up to any of these sort of reports, so you can say, oh wow, here's a new one out there. Let me check my Shadowserver reports. Is there a problem with it? The other thing that Shadowserver has done over the last couple of years is now all the reports have a criticality nature to it. And the criticality nature is based off of Shadowserver's experiences of working with these reports for 20 years. So right now they're kind of like standalone: the critical, high, medium, low, information or only, right? And the schema is all online with it. So the report types are out there. So if you get a critical report, okay, it's something you should do about it, right? Do it quick because it's critical. It's not tied to CVSS or the exploitability EPSS score with it. even though Shadowserver participates with those specifications. Now, in the reporting, you'll have this kind of like understanding of the naming of the report types, right? So there's, there's scanning that goes on where it looks at the population. There's the scan, there's it's vulnerable, right? So it kind of shows where it's kind of the data sets are coming from and the type, like, population SSH, population HTTP, scan for SNMP, scan for Telnet. If it's a vulnerable HTTP, right? So you get these kind of clarifications with it, and this is in the API query part of it. So part of it, right? So this is kind of that part. You have dependent, also listed in reports is where it's actually coming from. So you get these different types of, like, if it came from a compromised system, if it was a sinkhole report, if it's a honeynet report, if it's a vulnerable exchange point. So this is kind of like, prioritization, kind of like looking at the sort of things to do with it. Now, when you first start up with Shadowserver and you're trying to get your network up in shape, there's going to be, maybe a lot in your reporting in the beginning. Don't panic. Remember, every day, pick something, go fix it. Next day, fix the next thing. Next day, fix the next thing. But it can be overwhelming. So what you can do is say, can you turn on Delta mode? So what Delta mode does is once a week, you get a complete list of everything. And then each day, for the next 6 days, you get here's the things that have changed. So that way you're not overwhelmed every day with, like, I got 120 reports emailed to me. Okay, that's overwhelming. It shuts you off. You don't want that, right? So the Delta mode allows you to say, here's once a week, here's the complete reports. And then every day you kind of, work on something. Every day, work on something, right? Take a few months. Believe me, I've done this many different times in many different organizations that I've run, and many organizations I help peers go through, and it's just every day get at it. And all of a sudden, the numbers reduce and reduce. Your network gets safer, and then you're to a point where Shadowserver is in monitor and alert mode. Fantastic, right? And then you move on to the next things in security. So what are different ways of reducing risk? Let's take an example. All right, so here's an example. A year ago, before I was like doing more things inside Shadowserver, I was outside Shadowserver. Remember, I've been a long-time user for Shadowserver. In this particular case, we found that the industry has been so fixated on let's do sign in the routes for BGP security. Border Gateway Protocol is one of the glues that glues the internet together. It's critical to the internet, right? And it all runs on port 179. That's the BGP port. So when two routers connect together, they're connected over port 179. All right. So what happened was we found out that, hey, nobody's secure in port 179. And the inside of a router is very easy to attack if it's not protected. And 20 years ago, we figured out how to protect routers. But we found out 20 years later, people are not putting in the proper access list to protect the routers. So we have a security risk, all right? So the way this worked, this is typical. This is a typical way of researchers, me being in my researcher mode back in 2023, NZITF is a security organization in New Zealand. We had a bi-weekly call, right? And on the bi-weekly call, we had two organizations that said, yeah, I got hit with a BGP, port 179 attack. Took out our BGP. Wait a minute. That shouldn't happen. Okay. Oh, yeah, we didn't have the ACLs up. Okay. How bad is this? I checked Shodan. Oh, wow. It's close to 400,000 open 179 ports. That's close to 400,000 BGP sessions, wide open, easy to attack. I go, okay, run a validation test. I'm missing something. There's something going on that missed. Nope. There's a problem. All right, let me bounce this off of some peers. In the first.org organization, there's a network security special interest group. So I bounced off my peers there. Yeah, it's a problem. All right, we need to validate Showdown. Let's validate. Hey, Shadowserver, can you do reports on this? Shadowserver said, no problem. We'll start, and they created 2 brand new reports. All right, so we got 2 brand new reports on BGP security that you can get, all right? And we'll put it into the dashboard. Okay, and it confirmed the showdown data sets. All right, so now we got new reporting going out. Okay, let's do some more peer review. Let's craft an advisory. Let's send it out to the entire FIRST community. All right, so you see how that worked. Researchers can actually go, in this case, we consulted together. We reached out to Shadowserver. Shadowserver, can you help with this? Shadowserver goes like, this makes perfect sense. Now we got new reporting. Now here's what you do, right? Here's an example of a cut and paste from the showdown report a couple of weeks ago. Here's the Shadowserver data set. There's a lot exposed because what goes on with this, how bad could this get? If I hit 100 routers and 100 locations and start them doing BGP flapping, you're talking about instability across the entire internet. So if you want to have a way where you can actually cause massive disruption across the entire internet, here's your technique. Easily fixed. All you need to do is put the protective ACLs up. There's a blog on this. Different national CSIRTs put advisories on this. Easy to fix, right? So this is an example of Shadowserver in action, of a researcher working, getting the alert out, letting people know there's a risk, community working together, and Shadowserver delivering you, all right? So then, give an example. I was doing a review. Now, a year later, I'm inside Shadowserver helping out with some outreach exercises. So I'm talking to one of my friends at one of the big US carriers. I mentioned this, and he goes like, I missed it. Sorry, Barry, I didn't see all your alerts. I missed it. Let me look. Holy cow, I got 60 routers on my network that are exposed. The network team didn't secure it. I got them secured, all right? Within an hour, all 60 routers were protected, all right? Very easy for them. He just pulled up the Shadowserver reports. Here's all the routers, sends up a ticket, gets his network team, everything's secured. Risk averted, all right? That's Shadowserver in action. That's the sort of thing that we do with it. So what we're trying to do is, if you got to this stage of the report, go check your BGP. Subscribe to the reports, check your BGP. Here's the two reports. Accessible to BGP and Open BGP Service Report are the two reports you can now get as your standard Shadowserver delivery, because these are critical infrastructure, right? And let's knock these things down where we don't have the risks to the internet, all right? And speaking of the dashboard, since we're starting to use the dashboard, let's talk about the dashboard, all right? So we got this public dashboard that got announced. And this public dashboard is in multiple languages now. And there's more languages. By the time this video is out, there's even more languages out there. So the language part here is going to be obsolete. So the dashboard gives, it's a tool, and you've seen it pop up in the press all the time. And it's a tool that allows the world to kind of see, here's all the data sets that Shadowserver has, and start seeing how it plays out. What is the risk with it? And so, different organizations can use it. You got, tree map sort of approaches. You can, and we're going to do some webinars on how do you leverage and use all these different reports, right? So, you can go through and select tags on, here's different Android vulnerabilities from a sinkhole, in different countries, like these are infected handsets, right? You got like special reports that Shadowserver can kick off, on like avalanche details, country level, regional different reports you can put out there. So there's a lot of different sort of reports with it. So you're invited to go to dashboard.shadowserver.org and start playing around with it. We're going to have tutorials on it. At the time of this recording, we got Bahasa Indonesian, Bahasa Malayo for Malaysian. We got Tagalog in Philippines, and we got Thai, right? So, and Arabic, right? So these are kind of like the languages that are there, all right? And there's more coming out, all right? So we're trying to make it accessible to people from a language standpoint, right? So the way you look at it is down at the bottom, and you can pull it up, all right? So you can pull up the language. So by the time you guys see this video, you'll probably have like a whole list of even additional languages. And there's special reporting that comes out, like in this particular case on attack statistics, we can go out there and say, here's the exploitability list, the KEV list as they call it, that CISA puts out there. So certain countries in certain places in the world will say, here are vulnerabilities you have to get fixed right now, right? Because there's a larger risk. And this is a tool to allow you to actually go do that. The reports have come in handy for doing special analysis. Sometimes people contact Shadowserver and say, hey, can you check on things like outages, like when the volcano in Tonga erupted, and you're able to monitor based off of results of the scans and results of the data sets coming in, what was happening to the internet connectivity based off of that stat. Specific scanning goes on. Like, for instance, when the iRobot Roomba, was being, malwared and used, for miscreant activities, we're scanning for these little robots in people's homes, right? That sort of work with it. And all the different observable attacks. You can see the different devices used for attack vectors. The dashboard's, very useful as it is right now. It's growing. It's being added to. This is the role of the Alliance and other funders of Shadowserver to say, hey, we want to get more input into this. If you have a really cool idea for the dashboard, send a note to Shadowserver at contact and say, hey, here's an idea for the dashboard. Have you guys thought of this? Send those suggestions in. We love to get the details of how it all works out there with, attacking devices and things like that, right? How we can play around with all the different types of tools, right? On, the uses of it, right? Mikotech boxes, top things. So if you have questions on this, send them into the comments on this YouTube page as you'll be watching this YouTube page. Send them into contacts. Let us know what's going on. One of the things as you sign things up, as my personal experience with it, is whenever I set up Shadowserver inside of our organization, I use a alias inside. So I'll set up like Shadowserver-champions at whatevercompany.com, right? Or whatever company organization, right? And then I'll sign people up to that alias, and then I'll sign this up to Shadowserver. So all the reports come to this email alias internally. And that just helps manage, so it's easy for people inside the organization to get access to the Shadowserver stuff. And then in the world of Slack and different chat tools and Microsoft Teams and, that sort of WebEx and things like that, I'll set up chat groups so people can chat away on leveraging the Shadowserver report. So here's two ways of leveraging it. Send it out to multiple teams. In other words, you're hearing this, send this link to other people inside your organization and say, hey, maybe you guys can benefit from this. Hey, I'm in a network team. Hey, InfoSec department, what do you think about this? Hey, Mr. CISO, what do you think about this? Hey, Mr. CIO, what do you think about this? Hey, different, people inside of the departments, set things up, send a word around. And then watch out, sign up for the public email list, sign up for Twitter or X, sign up for the LinkedIn, and follow along and watch for the advisories to come out. Because every week there's 2 to 3 a week come out, and these are like critical issues that come out there that can help you get ahead of the game. And the key thing is to get fixed before they come, trying to knock on the door of your network and violate your network. The KEV list is especially important, because those of you who are in the United States and you are under CISA's instructions to actually get things fixed as fast as possible, if it's on the KEV list, this list here is an important tool, because this will show through with you, right? You can go back and look at your reports and say, okay, where are these devices in my network I gotta go fix, right? With the KEV list with it. So again, sign up for the public mail list, sign up for Shadowserver, right? So you get the reports. Sign up for the API, so you integrate into the tools. Start small. Don't try to fix everything. Fix one thing at a time, document it, move on to the next. And remember, every time you find something that Shadowserver sees, it could have already been exploited. So always ask that question, could it be exploited? And then watch out for new things coming out from Shadowserver, because it's constant. There's researchers working, and this sort of outreach means even more activity will come out there. How much does it cost you? Time. Cost you time. All right. Remember, organizations who want to support the Shadowserver's mission, they join the Alliance, because they're part of, like, let's make the internet a safer place. But the 99% of the constituents who use Shadowserver reports, none of this data that keeps on getting better and better cost you anything. So you start with this, get in the habit. every day, work on best common practices, preventive maintenance, and clean up the security issues, and then move on to commercial tools. Commercial tools are needed, but if the commercial tools don't work if you're not in the habit of using it. If you're doing the example, if you're doing multi-factor authentication and you're not having somebody with the daily habit of checking your multi-factor authentication failure logs, then MFA could be useless because you're not seeing the break-in attempts to try to bypass MFA. The bypass attempts for MFA, how do we know that somebody tried to bypass MFA? Because it shows up in the logs. So if you're not in the habit of, here's every day, let me go check out my MFA logs. MFA could be, a lot of expense, and then they still get into your network. So you start with Shadowserver. Shadowserver gets you in the habit every single day. That's the idea around this. All right. So again, free summary reports. Free the daily reports and delivered via email or API. And then, we'd love to see you leveraging and hear more about how you're using Shadowserver. So thank you. If you got all the way back to this end, I honor you for listening to this long presentation and hope if you have questions, post them in the comments. We'll answer them. Send a note to contacts, right? So contacts at shadowserver.org, or follow us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and good hunting. Thank you.